Ethan Cole woke up at 4:52 in the morning in a small apartment tucked away behind an old laundromat on Rutledge Avenue in Charleston, South Carolina. The digital clock by the window blinked a faint red light in the blue-gray darkness of the early morning. Outside, dawn had not yet broken. The coastal city hung between two worlds, not yet awake enough to be noisy, but no longer completely silent. In the distance, the low rumble of a cargo ship horn from the Charleston harbor sounded like metal scraping across water. Ethan sat up slowly on his old bed. His knees creaked softly. 62 years of life leave their mark on a man's body in very quiet ways. He reached for his glasses resting on a stack of books by the bed, then stood up. The old wooden floorboards groaned familiarly beneath his feet. The tiny apartment had only 2 bedrooms and a narrow kitchen, but it was clean to the point of near minimalism. No expensive decorations, no art pieces, no Swiss watches kept in glass cases. Only things that were actually used: an old wooden table, a silver coffee maker, scuffed at the corners, a dark brown leather armchair, its armrests worn and faded, and picture frames. So many picture frames. Ethan switched on the kitchen light. A soft yellow glow spread across the counter, illuminating the navy blue suit he had neatly hung up the night before. He poured coffee into a white ceramic mug, standing still for a few seconds to watch the steam rise. The whole room filled with the rich aroma of dark roast coffee, the smell of mornings he once thought he would never live to see again. He took off his light sweater and stood before the ironing board set up near the window. Hot steam hissed in short, steady bursts. Ethan pulled the sleeve of his suit jacket taut, carefully smoothing the iron along the crease. His movements were slow and precise, like someone handling something far more precious than clothing. The suit was not new. It had been with him for nearly 10 years. The cuffs were slightly frayed. An inner button had been replaced with a cheaper one. But it was clean, neat, lovingly cared for. He never dressed to impress anyone else. He wore it out of respect for himself. The first light of day began to filter through the curtains. A thin beam of sunlight fell onto a pocket watch resting on the table. The worn gold casing of the watch reflected a pale honey-colored light. Ethan paused. He picked up the watch very gently. His thumb brushed over a small scratch near the clasp. That scratch had been there since 1989, the day his father dropped it on the Savannah docks on a windy afternoon. Ethan still remembered his father's laugh as he picked it up, saying that the things worth keeping usually carry a few scars. Ethan opened the watch's cover. The hands were still ticking steadily. Inside was an old, faded photograph. A little girl about 6 years old was sitting on his shoulders at Folly Beach, her face sticky with pancake syrup, laughing so hard her eyes crinkled into 2 small curves. Amelia, his daughter. Ethan let out a soft laugh, then his eyes softened. He remembered that morning Amelia was wearing a denim jacket that was way too big for her because it came from a thrift store. The 2 of them had breakfast at a seaside pancake house, spending only $14.27, but Amelia had looked at him as if he were the richest man in the world. When the waitress brought out their food, Amelia had looked up and asked him a serious question. "Daddy, do real-life heroes actually exist?" Ethan had asked her back, "What do you think?" She sat in deep thought for a long moment, clumsily wiping her mouth with a napkin before replying. "I think they do, because every time I'm scared of something, you always make it go away, Daddy." Ethan had never forgotten those words. There are things children say that stay in an adult's heart longer than any grand speech. He set the watch down and picked up the letter he had written the night before. Just plain white paper. No embossed envelope, no elegant signature. Just a few lines from a father to his daughter on her wedding day. He wrapped the letter and the watch in simple brown paper, then tied a string around the package. Neat and simple, quiet, sincere. Ethan walked into the bathroom, adjusted his collar, and looked at his reflection in the mirror. His hair had grown much grayer than last year. Fine lines creased the corners of his eyes like folds in old paper, but his eyes remained calm. He straightened his tie. "Today I just want to be the father of the bride," he whispered softly. Then he turned off the light. An hour later, the old yellow cab drove along the coastal road leading to Belmont Crown Harbor. The five-star hotel, sitting right on the water, rose in the distance like a palace of glass and light. The sun was just rising over the ocean. The early morning sun reflected off the massive windows, making the entire building look as if it were glowing. A long line of supercars stretched in front of the entrance. Ferraris, Bentleys, Rolls-Royces, McLarens. The low rumble of engines rose in waves, mingling with the scent of expensive perfume and the salty sea breeze. A black helicopter touched down on the lawn near the private marina behind the hotel. Two businessmen from Manhattan stepped out, wearing suits that cost more than a year of rent for most people. White-gloved concierge staff pushed luggage carts. VIP guests from New York and Chicago had just arrived from their first-class flights. A wedding costing nearly $500,000 was about to begin, and everything at Belmont Crown Harbor was designed to make people feel like they either belonged to the absolute top of this world or did not belong here at all. Preston Hale stood in the middle of the lobby, looking more like a CEO running a billion-dollar merger than a groom. 3 event planners surrounded him with iPads and walkie-talkies. He adjusted the placement of the champagne tables, double-checked the VIP guest list, confirmed the seating arrangements for the investment firms from Manhattan, ordered a change in the tablecloth color for the ocean view section because the afternoon light wouldn't look prestigious enough on the wedding live stream. Preston liked to be in control of everything. He loved the feeling of everyone moving exactly as he wanted. Every single detail of this wedding had to be perfect. Perfect for the cameras. Perfect for the elite. Perfect for the political and financial future he had always envisioned for himself. A young valet was leaning in to take the keys to a Lamborghini when he noticed the old yellow cab crawling into the VIP driveway. He frowned instinctively. The worn-out taxi looked like a glaring typo in the middle of a row of gleaming supercars. It simply did not belong here. The cab pulled up to the curb. Ethan stepped out. He wore an old navy blue suit. His leather shoes were polished with meticulous care. A brown paper package was cradled in his hands. The valet stared a few seconds longer than common courtesy allowed. It was a look Ethan had encountered far too many times in his life. The dismissive gaze of those who believed wealth was the sole measure of human worth. But Ethan said nothing. He simply looked up at the Belmont Crown Harbor, gleaming under the morning sun. Then he walked slowly toward the main entrance. Ethan Cole walked through the glass revolving doors of the Belmont Crown Harbor at 4:17 in the afternoon. No one welcomed him right away, but everyone watched. It was that peculiar silence reserved only for places of immense wealth. No one needed to say out loud that something was out of place. Their eyes did all the talking. The steady click of Ethan's leather shoes echoed against the white marble floor. Slow, steady, calm. The hotel lobby unfolded before him like a stage set for the American elite. Grand crystal chandeliers hung high above, casting a golden glow over hundreds of champagne flutes on silver trays. The scent of white orchids mingled with expensive niche perfumes, creating an atmosphere of luxury so thick it felt almost cold. Near the bar, A group of Manhattan elites stood talking about energy stocks and beachfront properties in Florida. An elderly couple, dressed in elegant black tuxedos, glanced at Ethan and immediately looked away, as if they had accidentally witnessed something unsightly. A blonde woman wearing a blue diamond necklace tilted her head toward her husband. The man gave Ethan a second look, a gaze that lingered for an extra half-second, long enough to convey exactly what he thought. Ethan kept walking. He held the brown paper package close to his chest. At the far end of the lobby, Preston Hale stood beside a 6-foot champagne tower with 3 real estate investors from New York. He wore a custom Milanese tuxedo, his hair perfectly coiffed, his smile so precise it looked rehearsed in a mirror. Everything about Preston was engineered like a carefully crafted PR campaign. Even the way he laughed carried the distinct scent of money. One of the investors was detailing a new resort deal in Malibu when Preston suddenly spotted Ethan. The smile froze on his face. His eyes swept from the worn leather shoes up to the navy suit, finally resting on the brown paper package. 1 second, 2 seconds. Preston set his champagne glass down. He stepped away from his VIP guests and walked straight toward Ethan. The atmosphere in the lobby shifted subtly, as if someone had just tightened an invisible wire. Ethan stopped when Preston stepped into his path, blocking his way. Less than 3 feet separated them. Preston did not bother asking who he was first. First, his eyes went to the suit. Only then did he look up at his face. "Who let you in here?" His voice was loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Ethan kept his voice calm. "I am here for my daughter's wedding." Preston frowned. "Your daughter, Amelia Cole?" A brief silence fell over them, and then Preston laughed. The laugh wasn't loud, but it was sharp enough to make a few people nearby turn and look. "You are Amelia's father. That's right." Preston looked Ethan over once more closely this time, as if his brain were trying to find any logical connection between that worn-out suit and this lavish wedding. Then he gave a slight, dismissive shake of his head. Unbelievable. One of the guests near the bar chuckled, almost as a social reflex. Preston stepped closer. "Do you have any idea who is in this room today?" Ethan didn't answer. Manhattan investment firms. The chairman of the Westmore hotel chain. 2 state senators. People flew first class just to attend this wedding. 1, 2. He glanced down at the package wrapped in brown paper and, "You walk in here as if you just wandered off a bus." A few quiet laughs echoed from behind, not many, but enough. Ethan felt the entire hall watching him, treating him like free entertainment during cocktail hour. He remained perfectly still. Preston crossed his arms. "Be honest. You're some distant relative, right? Or maybe an off-duty server who took a wrong turn into the VIP section." "I am the father of the bride," Ethan repeated. This time, his voice was lower, steadier. Preston tilted his head with a smirk. "If that's the case, then Amelia should thank me for teaching her how to behave in high society." A man nearby nearly spit out his champagne, laughing. A woman in a silver dress turned her head, but the corners of her mouth still twitched upward. Ethan felt his heartbeat slow down, not out of fear, but out of sheer disappointment. Preston looked at his suit one more time. "Where did you even get that suit? A thrift store?" The hall fell even quieter. Many people realized things had gone too far, but no one spoke up. That is what makes the cruelty of the elite so much more terrifying than any scream. It always happens in polite silence. Ethan looked Preston dead in the eye. "You are making a mistake, son." Preston laughed again. "My only mistake was letting a beggar in to ruin the image of this wedding." The word beggar hit the cold marble floor with such weight that the entire hall seemed to freeze for a beat. A passing waitress froze, her hands stopping mid-air. The champagne glasses on her tray rattled softly. At the far end of the hall, the violin music kept playing, but it grew faint as if the sound itself was recoiling. Preston turned to the 2 security guards near the door. "Get him out of here." The 2 guards exchanged a look. The older guard instinctively stepped forward out of professional reflex, but the younger one, a man of about 26, remained frozen for a few seconds. He looked at Ethan, then down at the brown paper package, and then back up at the old man's face. For some reason, Ethan did not look like a troublemaker at all. He stood there with absolute calmness, with so much dignity. He looked exactly like a man trying to hold on to his remaining dignity in a place where no one wanted him. "Sir," the young guard spoke softly, "perhaps we should double-check the list first." Preston whipped his head around. "I did not ask you to check anything." His voice was ice-cold. "I told you to get him out." The young guard hesitated. Preston stepped right up to his face. "Unless you want to turn in your uniform tomorrow morning." The air froze. The older guard placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "I am sorry, sir." Ethan looked at the hand on his shoulder for a brief moment. Then he gave a slow, gentle nod. No resistance, no argument, no explanation. He simply held his brown paper package a little closer to his chest and turned toward the exit. The click of his leather shoes echoed across the vast marble floor. Tap, tap, tap. Every single step was painfully loud. No one said a word. No one tried to stop them. 200 people in tuxedos and evening gowns stood by, watching a father get dragged away from his daughter's wedding as if it were the most normal thing in the world. A glass of champagne froze mid-air in someone's hand near the grand staircase. One woman lowered her eyes, unable to look him in the face. A businessman adjusted his tie, as if looking busy could somehow shield him from the guilt. And Preston, he stood in the center of the grand hall like a king who had just swept away an embarrassment. As Ethan neared the main entrance, a drunken voice called out from the bar, "Hey, did someone accidentally call an Uber for this guy?" A few ripples of laughter broke out. This time the blow cut deeper. Ethan stopped in his tracks for just 1 second. Just 1 second. Then he kept walking. The heavy wooden doors swung open before him. A gust of chilly late afternoon ocean air rushed into the hall. Ethan stepped outside. The 2 security guards remained inside, and the heavy doors slowly shut behind him. The dull, heavy thud echoed like a coffin lid sealing shut. Outside, the final rays of daylight painted the Charleston Sea in deep gold. Ethan stood alone on the stone steps. The gift wrapped in brown paper was still in his hand, intact, but something deep inside him had just shattered. Amelia Cole was standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling mirror in the penthouse's bridal suite of the Belmont Crown Harbor when it all began to fall apart. The suite was nearly the size of a luxury Manhattan apartment. Late afternoon sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a soft golden glow over the ivory Vera Wang wedding dress that draped over her like liquid silk. Far below, the Charleston Sea shimmered in the fading light. A white yacht lay anchored at the hotel's private dock, and a helicopter sat quiet on the east lawn. Everything was so beautiful, it felt surreal. It felt more like a luxury perfume ad than a wedding day. A makeup artist was touching up the highlighter under Amelia's eyes, while 2 hotel arranged the train of her gown across the light-colored hardwood floor. Clara Bennett stood near the mini champagne bar by the window. She wore a pale blue bridesmaid dress, far simpler than those of the others. A Bluetooth earpiece was still tucked into her ear. She had been juggling her part-time job with the event coordination team all morning. Clara's phone buzzed, a message, then another. Clara opened them. Her face instantly froze. They were from her cousin, who was working as a bartender downstairs in the grand hall. Clara read the words a second time, still unable to process them. Amelia was staring at her reflection with a strange expression. She didn't look happy, but she didn't look anxious either. It was a distant, uneasy look, like someone standing before a massive door, having no idea what waited on the other side. She turned her head. Clara. There was no immediate answer. Amelia frowned slightly. Clara. Clara looked up. Her eyes changed completely. Amelia's heart sank. What's wrong? Clara gripped her hand tightly. Amelia, your father was just dragged out of the hotel. It felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. The makeup artist behind her froze in shock. The soft jazz music playing in the room suddenly felt miles away. Amelia blinked. She couldn't process what she had just heard. What did you say? Clara stepped closer. Preston just had security drag your father out in front of everyone. Amelia stared at Clara as if her brain refused to process the words. No, her voice was barely a whisper. That's impossible. Clara slowly shook her head. Someone in the lobby just texted me. Preston called him a beggar. Amelia felt her legs go completely numb. The chair behind her bumped against her legs, but she didn't even register it. No, she repeated it. Even weaker this time. She looked into the mirror. Her mascara was flawless. Her hair was styled in an elegant, intricate updo. Her wedding dress cost more than a 4-year college tuition for most people. Then the image of her father flashed in her mind. His old navy suit, his leather shoes, always polished with such care. The way he smiled whenever she talked about her job. The way he always stood off to the side at parties, just to make others feel more comfortable. Amelia spun around. Where is Preston? 3 minutes later, the penthouse elevator doors slid open. Amelia practically stormed out. Her long wedding gown trailed behind her on the polished floor. 2 assistants ran after her to hold the train, but they couldn't keep up. The white lace swept aggressively across the marble steps as she rushed down to the lobby. The sharp click of her high heels echoed through the grand hotel lobby. Dozens of guests turned to look. A few immediately averted their eyes. They already knew. That was what hurt Amelia the most. No one stopped her. Preston was standing near the champagne bar with 2 investors from Miami when he spotted her. The practiced smile on his face faltered. Babe. He stepped toward her. You shouldn't be down here right now. We only have 15 minutes before. You dragged my father out of the hotel. Amelia's voice wasn't loud, but the entire lobby fell silent almost instantly. Preston shot a quick glance around the room. He hated anything that went off script. I was just handling an inappropriate situation. Inappropriate, Amelia repeated. That is, my father. Preston lowered his voice, trying to maintain his composed corporate demeanor for the cameras. Amelia, listen to me. You know who is here today. The Manhattan hedge funds, the Westmore board, the Callahans. These people aren't used to. He paused for a fraction of a second. Not used to people like your father. Amelia stood frozen in disbelief. Those words fractured something deep inside her. For the first time in all the years she had loved him, she truly saw the man behind that flawless tuxedo. No more lavish dinners. No more polite conversations. No more image of the successful, ambitious man she once believed was her future. Only a man trying to protect his status by humiliating someone who had less. What did you just call my father? Preston exhaled sharply through his nose. Amelia, I am trying to save our wedding day. You don't understand how the elite class operates. Image is everything. People judge every single detail here. She stared at him without blinking. And you think my father embarrasses you? Preston was silent for a few seconds. His biggest mistake was thinking that his silence made him look reasonable. You think he doesn't belong here? The words fell like a final blow, Amelia felt her throat tighten. Dozens of small memories flashed in her mind. Her father fixing her bicycle in the pouring rain. Her father staying up all night when she had a fever at 10 years old. Her father wearing that same suit on her college graduation day. That man had never made her feel ashamed, not even once. But Preston had just done that to him in front of hundreds of people. And the most painful part was that he saw nothing wrong with what he did. The mascara under Amelia's eyes began to smudge. A bitter laugh almost escaped her lips. All of this, just because of his suit? Preston stepped closer. It is not just about the suit. It is about our image, our future. You have to understand that the world we are entering is nothing like your old life. My old life, Amelia repeated, her voice barely a whisper. That was when she realized she had never truly known the man standing in front of her. Love does not die in a single moment. It dies when respect is gone. Amelia took a step back, and then another. Preston began to feel things slipping out of his control. Babe, don't overreact. After the wedding, don't call me that. Her voice trembled for the first time. Preston froze. Amelia turned away. The long white train of her wedding dress swept across the stone floor like a silver wave. She ran toward the hotel's main doors. The Charleston ocean breeze rushed in the moment the doors opened. A light rain had started to fall. Tiny raindrops slanted in the evening wind out by the harbor. Amelia walked down the grand stone steps in front of the hotel and stopped. She saw her father. Ethan was sitting alone on a stone bench near a row of palm trees facing the ocean. His shoulders were slumped. His hands were still clutching the brown paper package. The misty rain gently soaked the shoulders of his old navy suit. He was not crying. He was not angry. He was not calling anyone. He just sat there, staring out at the distant water like a man who had just realized something deeply sad about the world. Amelia stood frozen in the rain, and then her heart shattered completely. Clara Bennett had learned very early on that a hospital is the most expensive place to be a decent human being. Her mother had started chemotherapy last November. Stage 3 lung cancer. No proper insurance, no savings, no one to help. Since then, Clara had taken on almost every job she could find in Charleston. During the day, she worked as an administrative assistant for a small event planning company. In the evenings, she served at weddings at Belmont Crown Harbor. On weekends, she took extra shifts at a cafe near the harbor. Some weeks, she slept less than 4 hours a night, yet the medical bills kept coming, crashing in like ocean waves. $3,417, $5,902, $1,284. The cold numbers printed on the white paper sometimes made Clara feel like she was trying to bail water out of a sinking ship with her bare hands. That afternoon, her phone still showed an unanswered text from St. Matthew Hospital. Her mother needed a new round of medication, not covered by insurance, $2,600. Clara had stared at that number for nearly 10 minutes in the staff locker room before stepping back out into the ballroom, smiling at the VIP guests as if her life were completely perfect. That was something the luxury service industry taught you very quickly. To smile even when your world is falling apart. When Amelia rushed out to look for her father, the grand lobby of the Belmont Crown Harbor fell into a strange, hushed chaos. No one was speaking loudly, yet everyone was talking. Whispers drifted past champagne flutes and silk gowns, flowing through tightly gathered groups of guests like faint electric currents running through the room. Preston Hale stood near the bar, his expression growing more irritated by the second. He hated losing control, and for a man like Preston, the worst thing was not making a mistake. It was having other people witness it. Colin Mercer, Preston's close friend from their days at Princeton, walked over with a glass of whiskey in hand. He was slightly shorter than Preston, his hair slicked back to a gloss, the kind of man who always smiled before saying something cruel. "You really made Amelia lose it this time." Preston clenched his jaw. "She will calm down. I wouldn't be so sure. The entire ballroom just watched you kick the bride's father out like a homeless guy in a casino lobby." Preston drained his champagne glass. That old man should never have been here in the first place. Clara was passing by with a tray of champagne when she overheard those words. She faltered for a split second. Instinct told her to keep moving, but something inside held her back, keeping her hidden behind the marble pillar near the bar. Colin let out a soft chuckle. At least you need to control the narrative before the gossip gets out of hand. Preston tugged sharply at his tuxedo cuff. "I know what I'm doing. So, what's the plan?" Preston fell silent for a few seconds. Then he lowered his voice. "We say he was causing a scene." Colin raised an eyebrow. "How so? Who cares?" "Just enough to justify security dragging him out." Clara felt her hands turn ice cold. Preston continued. "Say he was drunk, or that he insulted a VIP guest, or tried to crash the party without being on the guest list. It doesn't have to be completely true. I just need the story to sound plausible." Colin laughed. "Now that is the Preston Hale I know." Clara stood frozen behind the pillar. Her heart hammered so violently it made her chest ache, not from surprise, but because she finally realized the most terrifying truth about people like Preston. To them, destroying another person's dignity wasn't even a big deal. It was just image management, just crisis control, just another media strategy. Clara looked around. No one was paying attention to her. Quietly, she set her champagne tray down on the service table behind her and slipped her phone out of her pocket. Her hands were trembling slightly. The screen lit up with a photo of her mother in the hospital. An IV line, a pale blue headscarf, and that fragile, weary smile trying so hard to reassure her. Clara swallowed hard. Then she opened the voice recorder app. She turned around, pretending to check a work message, but kept her phone angled toward Preston. Colin swirled his glass of whiskey. "I'm just curious," Colin said. "What if that old man really is Amelia's father?" Preston let out a cold chuckle. "Then that's even more embarrassing for her." The clinking of ice against the crystal glass sounded chillingly cold. "People like Amelia always think they can step into our world without cutting ties with their past," Preston continued. "But the truth is, if you want a seat at the table with billionaires, you have to play by their rules." Colin laughed, a bit louder this time. "And what exactly are those rules?" Preston adjusted his silk tie. "You don't let people like him ruin your image." Clara felt a tight lump form in her throat. She stared at her phone screen, watching the recording timer tick upward. The evidence was right there in her hands, but that evidence came with a price. If this recording ever leaked, the Belmont Crown Harbor would instantly know who was standing near Preston at that moment, and she would lose her job. Not just her part-time shift, but potentially her full-time job as well. The luxury event planning industry in Charleston was far smaller than most people realized. If just one 5-star hotel manager accused her of causing trouble with a VIP guest, she would be blacklisted everywhere. Clara thought of her mother, of the new prescription bills, of their rented apartment, and the electricity bill that was already overdue. And then she pictured Ethan Cole sitting all alone in the pouring rain with that brown paper package in his hands. The thought made her stomach twist into painful knots. There are defining moments in life when you realize exactly who you are about to become, not through words. Yet, after everything, they chose silence. Clara stopped the recording. She stood still for nearly 1 minute. Then she slipped her phone into the pocket of her dress. Outside the grand glass windows of the hotel, the rain began to fall harder, fine droplets, swept sideways by the ocean breeze through the palm trees lining the harbor. In the distance, Clara spotted Amelia. Her white wedding gown stood out starkly against the grey backdrop of the sea and sky. She was running toward the stone bench where Ethan sat alone. No one followed her. Not Preston, not her high society friends, not the VIP guests, only her father. Clara felt a sudden ache in her chest. She hurried over to the reception desk to grab a small notepad and a pen. She quickly scribbled a short note, "Don't let him leave alone." Clara folded the slip of paper. Then she slipped outside through the side door, near the oceanfront corridor. The cold wind immediately whipped through her hair. Amelia was now kneeling before Ethan by the stone bench, wrapping her arms around him like a lost child who had finally found her way home. Clara stood a few meters away. She didn't want to ruin the moment, but she knew what she had to do. She approached Amelia and quietly slipped the note into her hand. Amelia looked up. Mascara was smeared beneath her eyes. Clara didn't say much. She only stared at her for a long moment and gave a gentle nod. Sometimes, good people don't show up to save the world. They only show up to make sure someone else doesn't have to hurt alone. The Charleston sea rain began to fall heavier as Amelia sat down beside her father on the stone bench overlooking the water behind Belmont Crown Harbor. Far behind them, the five-star hotel still glowed like a miniature city made of crystal and gold. The faint strain of violin music from the ballroom drifted out on the ocean breeze, only to dissolve into the sound of the crashing waves. A $500,000 wedding was still trying to carry on as if nothing had happened. But for Amelia, everything had ended the very moment Preston called her father a beggar. She sat very close to Ethan, just like she used to sit beside him as a child whenever she had a nightmare. The hem of her white wedding dress was now stained with rainwater and beach sand. Her once perfect makeup was almost and completely ruined, and soft strands of hair fell messy against her cheeks, making her look nothing like a bride stepping out of a luxury magazine. She was just a heartbroken daughter. Ethan kept his gaze fixed on the ocean. His hands held the brown paper package on his lap, silent, calm, that only made Amelia want to cry even more. "Daddy," her voice cracked. "I'm so sorry." Ethan turned to look at her. There was no blame in his eyes, only sadness. "You don't have to apologize for what others did." Amelia bowed her head. "I should have seen it sooner." A sharp ocean breeze swept across the harbor, blowing the veil of her wedding dress to one side. The rhythmic crash of the waves against the stone shore sounded strangely hollow. Ethan fell silent for a few seconds before opening the brown paper package. He took out the pocket watch and placed it in Amelia's hand. The watch face caught the golden glow of the distant hotel. "Your grandfather used to say the most dangerous thing in the world isn't money." Ethan spoke slowly. "It's the feeling that you're better than everyone else just because you have it." Amelia looked down at the watch. Her fingers trembled slightly. "I don't understand why you never told me everything, Daddy." Ethan let out a soft laugh. "Because I didn't want you to grow up like the people in that hotel." He looked out at the Belmont Crown Harbor in the distance. The golden lights reflecting on the water made the entire building look as if it were floating in the middle of the dark sea. Beautiful, luxurious, and cold. When you were little, I saw too many children born into wealth who never learned the true value of a person. They learned to check their watches before looking into someone's eyes. They knew the price of a supercar, but didn't know how to treat a server with basic kindness. Amelia tightened her grip on the watch. I thought Preston wasn't like that. I know. Ethan's nodded softly. That's why I didn't say anything. He turned to look at her. I wanted a man to come along one day who would love you, even if he thought your father was just someone living in a tiny apartment behind a laundromat. Amelia truly began to cry. She was no longer trying to keep her composure. Tears mingled with the rain, streaming down her face. But he never loved me, did he? Ethan didn't answer right away. He looked out at the yachts anchored in the distance. One of them was playing soft jazz from the upper deck. Blue lights reflected off the dark water. I think. Preston loved the feeling of owning a version of you that fit the world he wanted to enter. Those words pierced straight through Amelia's chest. She replayed hundreds of little moments from the last 3 years in her mind. Preston had always wanted to control every little detail. The way she dressed for elite high society galas. The friends he deemed beneath their social circle. His quiet irritation whenever Ethan showed up wearing simple, casual clothes. The way he once casually remarked that some people were born to be near power while others were born to serve them. Back then, she had let it slide. She had chalked it up to simple ambition. Only now did she realize it was his true nature. I was so stupid, she whispered. No. Ethan shook his head. You just loved the wrong person. His voice was incredibly gentle. But that tenderness only made Amelia cry harder. She rested her head on her father's shoulder, just like she used to do when she was a little girl. Ethan gently stroked her hair. For a long time, neither of them said another word. There was only the sound of the crashing waves, the rushing wind, and the light drizzle falling on the surface of the Charleston Sea. Then Ethan pulled out his phone. The screen glowed against the blue-gray twilight of the late afternoon. He opened his contacts. Amelia caught a glimpse of a few names scrolling past on the screen. Names she had only ever heard mentioned on CNBC. A United States Senator, an airline CEO, an investment firm chairman. But Ethan bypassed them all. He stopped at a single name, Marcus Ellington. Ethan placed the call. The phone rang only once. A deep, low voice answered on the other end. I'm listening. Ethan stared at the distant 5-star hotel for a few more seconds before replying. It's time. Silence met his words on the other end. No questions asked, no asking what had happened. Just a brief silence from a man who already understood everything from the sheer tone of voice. Finally, Marcus spoke. Where do you want me to go? Belmont Crown Harbor. How long? 40 minutes. Ethan nodded slightly, even though the person on the other end couldn't see him. I'll wait. The call ended. Amelia looked at her father. Daddy, who is Marcus Ellington? Ethan didn't answer right away. He slipped his phone back into his pocket and stared out at the darkening sea. The ocean breeze gently ruffled his grey hair. There are some things I hoped you would never have to know. His voice was so calm, it sounded almost weary. But it seems tonight I have no other choice. Amelia felt her heart pounding. Something was shifting. The aura around her father no longer belonged to the man who lived in the back of a laundromat. He was still wearing that same old suit, still sitting on the stone bench in the rain. But for the first time, Amelia felt an invisible weight around him. It wasn't money. It wasn't flashy power. It was the presence of a man who had spent his life building something so massive he no longer had to prove himself to anyone. Farther inside the hotel, the glowing lights of the ballroom reflected off the water like a different world. A world of crystal stocks, private jets, and expensive smiles. Ethan stared at it for a long moment. There was no anger in his eyes, only a distant gaze, as if he had just realized that world never truly belonged to him. Inside the Belmont Crown Harbor, everything was starting to drift from the perfect script Preston Hale had envisioned for his wedding day. No one said it out loud, but everyone could feel it. The atmosphere in the ballroom had shifted the moment Amelia ran out of the grand hall in tears. Violins continued to play beneath the massive crystal chandeliers. Servers still glided through the room with trays of champagne. The LED screens behind the stage still displayed slideshows of Preston and Amelia's engagement photos on luxury yachts, Maldives resorts, and Manhattan charity galas. Everything was still undeniably luxurious, but no one was actually enjoying it anymore. Guests began checking their watches. A few stood in small groups, whispering to one another. An investment firm executive from New York was already asking his assistant if their private jet could clear for an earlier departure. An elderly couple near table 8 pretended to discuss real estate, but their eyes kept darting toward the main entrance. Wealthy people are incredibly good at pretending to be polite, but they are even better at smelling a scandal. Preston stood in the middle of the ballroom, a glass of champagne. He was still smiling, still shaking hands with guests, still adjusting his cufflinks every few minutes, a nervous, subconscious habit to reassure himself. But beneath his immaculate tuxedo, he could feel everything starting to slip from his grasp. His mother, Victoria Hale, stepped closer. She wore a black couture gown adorned with silver sequins, her neck draped in a pearl necklace, worth more than a middle-class home in Charleston. "Where is Amelia?" Preston didn't look at his mother. "She needs to calm down." Victoria lowered her voice. "I just heard whispers that you kicked the bride's father out of the hotel." Preston gripped his champagne glass tighter than necessary. He brought that on himself. Victoria remained silent for a few seconds. She was not a good person, but she was smart enough to know that publicly humiliating someone rarely ends well. "You need to get this ceremony over with before word spreads." Preston nodded. He turned to the wedding planner. "We start the ceremony in 10 minutes, but right at that moment, the main doors of the Belmont Crown Harbor swung open, not with force, not with a sound, but enough to command the attention of the entire room. A tall man stepped into the grand hall. A charcoal 3-piece suit hugged his nearly 6'3" frame. A silver Patek Philippe peeked from beneath his white shirt cuff. His polished black Oxford shoes reflected the crystal chandeliers on the hotel ceiling. Marcus Ellington walked in as if he owned the place. The sound of leather shoes clicked against the marble floor. Click, click, click. Not fast, unhurried, yet each step carried an invisible weight that fell over the ballroom, instantly silencing several conversations. A man near the bar froze. "Wait!" His wife spun around. "Oh my God, that's Marcus Ellington." The name began to ripple through the ballroom like an electric current. Marcus Ellington, the CFO of Dominion Crest Capital, the man who had just been featured on Forbes last month, the figure CNBC called the most dangerous financial mind on Wall Street over the last decade. One of the most influential figures in American infrastructure investment and luxury hospitality. Even those who knew nothing about finance had seen his face on television. And now he was walking straight into Preston Hale's wedding. Preston felt a sudden surge of adrenaline rush straight to his brain. Every ounce of his earlier anxiety vanished, replaced by sheer excitement. Marcus Ellington was here, in the flesh. This was worth far more than any endorsement from the state governor. If Marcus showed up at his wedding, the entire Manhattan investment elite would know that Preston Hale operated on a completely different level. He straightened his tie and practically rushed toward the main entrance. His perfect boardroom smile was back in place. Mr. Ellington," Preston's voice rang out, full of warmth and enthusiasm. "It is such an honor to have you here. I am Preston Hale, Vice President of Strategy. Marcus did not shake his hand. The slight was subtle, but it was enough to instantly shift the air around them. Preston's hand remained suspended in the air. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Marcus stared at the outstretched hand. Then he looked up, locking eyes with Preston. "I know who you are." His voice was low, perfectly composed. He did not have to raise his voice, but the entire ballroom heard him clearly. Preston's smile stiffened a fraction. "Well then, it is wonderful to finally meet you in person. I have always admired what Dominion Crest Capital has." Marcus raised a hand slightly. "Stop." Preston fell completely silent, not because he had been yelled at, but because Marcus spoke with the quiet authority of someone used to immediate, unquestioning obedience. Marcus tilted his head slightly, scanning the ballroom. His gaze swept past the Manhattan elite, the luxury hotel executives, and the guests standing frozen by the champagne tower. Then he spoke. "I did not come here for you." The entire ballroom seemed to freeze. Preston blinked. I'm sorry?" Marcus did not reply immediately. He simply turned, slowly looking back toward the grand entrance that had just opened behind him. Then he stepped to the side. A sudden hush fell over the room, a deeply unsettling silence. It was as if the entire ballroom had collectively held its breath without even realizing it. Then Ethan Cole stepped inside for the second time. The same old navy blue suit, the same leather shoes, slightly worn at the heels, the same gift wrapped in brown paper in his hand. But this time it was different. He no longer bowed his head. Ethan walked through the main entrance, his stride so calm it was almost terrifying. He did not rush. He was not angry. He had nothing to prove, and that alone shifted the energy in the entire room. For the first time since Ethan had arrived at Belmont Crown Harbor, people no longer looked at him as if he did not belong. A female guest unconsciously stood up a little straighter. A businessman who had been laughing at him just moments ago slowly lowered his champagne glass. A young waiter swallowed hard as he noticed Marcus Ellington stepping aside, deliberately making way for Ethan. Making way for him. Somewhere near the bar, a glass suddenly slipped and fell. Shatter. The sound of glass breaking against the marble floor made a few people flinch, but no one turned to look. The entire ballroom was transfixed by Ethan. Preston stood frozen. Everything in his mind was spinning out of control. Marcus Ellington, one of the most powerful men in American finance, standing right next to the man he had just called a beggar. This could not be happening. Ethan walked to the center of the grand ballroom and stopped. The warm light from the crystal chandeliers caught the silver in his hair. He did not look at Preston first. He looked at Amelia. She had just stepped back into the ballroom from the oceanfront corridor. Her mascara was still smudged. Her wedding gown was still damp from the rain. But the look in her eyes had completely changed. Ethan gave his daughter a subtle nod. It was a tiny gesture, but Amelia understood. Her father had made a decision. Marcus finally spoke. His voice was chillingly calm. "I think it is time everyone here realized who they have actually been dealing with." No one in the Belmont Crown Harbor ballroom dared to move after Marcus Ellington spoke. No one could remember when the violins had stopped playing. There was only the distant Sisavant ocean waves crashing against the thick glass, and the steady hum of the air conditioning from the hotel ceiling. 200 people stood beneath the crystal chandeliers like expensive statues, frozen in the absolute worst moment of their lives. Marcus looked around the room one last time, then spoke slowly. "Ethan Cole." He paused for exactly one beat. Founder and chairman of Dominion Crest Capital. The entire ballroom went dead silent, not the kind of silence born of politeness, but the kind of silence when the human brain has not yet processed what it just heard. A woman near the table, sick, unconsciously let her champagne glass slip from her hand. The glass hit the marble floor and shattered. No one turned to look. A real estate investor from Manhattan gaped as if he had just seen someone walk out of a grave. The man who had laughed when Preston called Ethan a beggar instantly turned pale. Dominion Crest Capital, an infrastructure and hospitality empire worth tens of billions of dollars. A fund holding major stakes in luxury resort chains from Miami to California. A legendary name in the world of American finance. And the man who had just been dragged out of the hotel like a vagrant was the one who built it all. Preston stood frozen, his face drained of color at a terrifying speed. Every drop of blood seemed to vanish from his face in a matter of seconds. No, this was no longer shock. It was the primal terror of realizing you have just destroyed your own life with your bare hands. Preston took a step back. His heel caught the edge of the ballroom carpet, sending him off balance for a fleeting moment. A few guests unconsciously shrank away from him as if he had suddenly become dangerous. This can't be. Preston's voice came out dry and hollow. Marcus did not look at him. He simply continued. 32 years ago, Ethan Cole founded Dominion Crest, starting with a shipping company that had just one old truck by the Savannah port. Today, the corporation has offices in 12 states and manages over $40 billion in infrastructure, hospitality, and commercial real estate assets. Every word Marcus spoke was like a hammer blow shattering the already cracking ballroom. Preston felt his head spinning. He replayed every single word he had said. A beggar doesn't belong here, ruining the wedding's image. Each phrase now returned to haunt him, cutting straight through his throat like a knife. Victoria Hale stepped closer. She tried to maintain her composure, but her hands began to tremble. Mr. Ellington, there must be some misunderstanding. There is no misunderstanding. Marcus cut her off. Mr. Cole had been publicly insulted inside the very hotel that belonged to his own conglomerate's investment portfolio. The entire ballroom began to shift, a subtle but palpable movement. Glances shifted. Invisible divides began to form. A couple standing next to Preston took half a step back without even realizing they were doing it. An investor who had been chatting with him just 10 minutes ago now turned away, pretending to check his phone. The elite possess a very sharp survival instinct. They always know exactly when to distance themselves from someone who is about to sink. Amelia stood in the middle of the ballroom, staring at Preston for a long moment. Her eyes were red, but they no longer wavered. There was only disappointment left, a disappointment so deep it was bone-chilling. Preston looked at her like a drowning man desperately reaching for the last floating piece of wreckage. Amelia, I didn't know. I swear to you, I had no idea who he was. And those exact words killed everything. Amelia let out a very soft laugh. A laugh that held more pain than tears. Then she slowly raised her hand and slipped her wedding ring off her ring finger. The large diamond caught the ballroom lights one last time before resting quietly in the palm of her hand. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. You just admitted the real issue, Preston. Her voice was quiet, yet so clear that everyone in the room heard it. You only respected my father when you knew he had money. Preston opened his mouth to speak. No, that's not. What if today my dad was still just a man living in the back of a laundromat? Amelia took a step closer. Would you still apologize? Preston could not answer. Because for the first time in his life, he was forced to look at himself without his money or status to shield him. Only then did Ethan speak. He did not raise his voice. He was not angry. That quietness made the entire ballroom fall even deeper into silence. If I were still poor today, Ethan looked directly at Preston. Would you even think you were wrong? a silence settled over them. Long, heavy, suffocating. Preston opened his mouth several times, but no sound came out, because he knew the answer, and everyone in the ballroom knew it too. Money did not change Ethan's dignity. It simply laid bare Preston's true nature. Clara Bennett stood near the service bar in the back. Her heart pounded so violently it made her chest ache. The phone in her hand felt as heavy as stone. The recording was still there. If she released it right now, there would be no turning back. She thought of her mother, of the chemotherapy bills, of her job, of her future. Then Clara looked at Ethan, a man who had just been humiliated in front of hundreds of people, yet never once raised his voice. She took a deep breath and stepped forward. Clara's voice trembled slightly. "I think everyone should hear this." The entire ballroom turned to look at her. Preston frowned. "Clara, what the hell are you doing?" Clara didn't answer. She pressed play on the recording. Preston's voice echoed with absolute clarity through the dead silent ballroom. "Just say he was causing a scene. Who cares? I just need the story to sound believable. And then, I can't let people like him ruin my image." Each word that played seemed to strip away another layer of Preston Hale's mask. Victoria Hale immediately stepped forward. "Turn it off." Her voice was ice cold. Right now. But it was already too late. An investor standing nearby slowly took a step back, distancing himself from Preston, then another and another, like the tide receding from a sinking ship. Preston looked around at the faces that had been smiling at him all evening. No one was going to save him. No one spoke up for him. No one even wanted to stand near him anymore. That was the most terrifying thing about the elite. They will lift you up to the skies when you are of use to them, and vanish the moment you become a liability to their image. Victoria tried to keep her voice calm. "We can explain this." A hotel partner from Miami cut him off. "I think our company should reconsider our contract with Hale Strategic." Another voice chimed in immediately after. "I agree." Then another. Every single word felt like shears cutting through the network. Preston had spent his entire life building. Preston turned to Ethan one last time. His eyes were no longer arrogant. There was only panic. "Mr. Cole, please." But Ethan just stared at him for a long moment. His gaze held no triumph. There was no gloating, only sadness. "Money does not buy dignity, Preston." His voice grew quiet. "It only exposes who a person truly is." 48 hours after that night at Belmont Crown Harbor, all of America knew the name Preston Hale. At first, it was just a 37-second video, no background music, no color grading, no sensational captions. Just the image of an elderly black man in an old Navy suit being dragged out of a five-star hotel during a lavish wedding, while a groom in a tuxedo stood behind, watching coldly. The video ended at the exact moment the massive wooden doors slammed shut behind Ethan Cole. That was what stayed with the viewers. That sound, like the world had just shut its doors on a human being. Clara posted the video at 11:43 p.m. She wrote nothing but a single brief sentence. He just wanted to walk his daughter down the aisle. 6 hours later, the video had over 3 million views. By the next morning, morning talk shows were discussing it. By afternoon, the hashtags Belmont Crown Harbor and Preston Hale were trending across the United States. Financial podcasts, civil rights lawyers, former NFL athletes, black CEOs, anyone who had ever been treated the way Ethan was. They all shared the video. But what truly ruined Preston was not the internet. It was what Dominion Crest Capital uncovered after Ethan requested an internal investigation. The board meeting took place on Monday at 8 a.m. at Dominion Crest's Manhattan headquarters. For the first time in nearly 4 years, Ethan Cole appeared in person in the 43rd floor boardroom. No designer suit, no entourage of assistants. He did not speak at length. He simply sat at the head of the long glass table, watching the board members silently open their folders. Marcus Ellington was the first to speak. His voice was as cold and precise as a financial report. The compliance department had completed its preliminary review of Preston Hale. The large screen at the end of the room lit up with a series of charts and internal emails. One by one, layer by layer, the masks were stripped away. A human resources manager began the presentation. Over the past 3 years, Preston had consistently blocked the promotion of employees of color within the luxury hotel strategy division. The reasons listed in the reports were always the same. Not a cultural fit, lacking executive presence, not polished enough for high-end clientele, polite corporate jargon. But everyone in the room knew what it actually meant. An email flashed on the screen. Sender Preston Hale. Subject, team image ahead of the Manhattan Harbor project pitch. A section of the text was highlighted in red. We need the right people standing in front of the investment funds. Do not put Marcus Reed in that meeting room. I do not want our clients thinking we are turning this into a diversity marketing campaign. The entire boardroom fell silent. Then another email appeared. A black financial analyst had been described by Preston as aggressive, even though her performance evaluations had rated her as outstanding for 3 consecutive quarters. Then another one. Preston joking with 2 colleagues about a Latino intern, speaking English with a Texas accent. Marcus Ellington's expression did not change throughout the meeting, but Ethan noticed his hand tightening around his pen several times. Then the legal audit department spoke up, and that was when everything truly began to fall apart. It was not just racism. Preston had also been manipulating investment data. For nearly 18 months, he had been altering the profit reports of the coastal luxury hotel division to inflate performance in front of the Manhattan investment funds. It was not large enough to be immediately detected, just enough to boost his bonuses, inflate the internal stock price, and secure his nomination for senior vice president next year. A lawyer from Dominion Crest slid a thick folder toward Ethan. The estimated damage is about $12.7 million if the SEC launches a formal investigation. The entire boardroom fell into a heavy silence. Ethan stared at the folder for a long time. Then he asked just one question. Did anyone ever warn us about this? Marcus replied. Yes. A compliance officer submitted an internal report 6 months ago, but middle management buried it. Ethan gave a slight nod. It was the nod of a man who had lived long enough to know that systemic evil rarely begins with monsters. It starts with the people who stay silent just to protect their positions. By that afternoon, Dominion Crest Capital issued an official statement. Preston Hale was fired immediately. All of his stock bonuses were frozen under the company's morality clause. The SEC launched a financial investigation 9. Strategic partners began canceling their contracts. The news spread even faster than the wedding scandal. CNBC, Bloomberg, the Wall Street Journal, Fox Business, Preston Hale's name was everywhere. He was no longer portrayed as a promising young executive. Instead, he was the poster child for the arrogance of the new money elite. The internet began digging up his past. College party photos featuring racist jokes, old tweets about affirmative action. A viral video spliced together footage of Preston mocking Ethan right next to Marcus Ellington, refusing to shake his hand. The memes were everywhere. The man who called the conglomerate chairman a beggar. Even his invitations to high society galas began to vanish. 3 Manhattan charity dinners quietly scrubbed Preston's name from their guest lists in a single day. An investment firm cancelled the contract on a Miami penthouse he had just put a deposit on. His bank demanded a review of his personal loans. Preston's phone began to ring less and less until it fell completely silent. The people who once called him the future of luxury investment no longer answered his texts. By the weekend, Preston was entirely alone in his penthouse overlooking the Hudson River. The nearly $8 million apartment was still as picture-perfect as an interior design magazine spread. Floor-to-ceiling windows, Italian leather chairs, a black marble bar imported from Europe, but for the first time, the space felt more like a morgue than a symbol of success. Preston sat on the living room floor. Without turning on the lights, his tie lay discarded under the table. His shirt was wrinkled and disheveled. The laptop screen in front of him was paused on the video of Ethan being dragged out of Belmont Crown Harbor. He had watched it nearly 30 times. Pausing it every single time at the exact moment, Ethan turned back to look at the lobby before the doors closed. There was no anger, no begging, just disappointment. That destroyed Preston more than any of the headlines out there. For the first time in his life, he couldn't find anyone else to blame. Not the media, not the internet, not Marcus Ellington, not Amelia. He had done this to himself. He was the one who had looked at a decent, honorable man and decided he wasn't worthy enough to step into his room. Preston buried his face in his hands. His shoulders began to shake. And then he broke down and cried. It wasn't the clean, photogenic crying you see in the movies. It was the ugly, desperate sob of someone who just realized he had destroyed his entire life, all because he thought he was better than everyone else. 1 year after that night at Belmont Crown Harbor, spring arrived in Charleston with warmer sea breezes, and the palm trees began to turn a rich, deep green once again. Everything online had quieted down long ago. The hashtags had vanished. The breaking news was replaced by new scandals. The reaction videos that once racked up millions of views now drifted somewhere deep in the algorithm, like forgotten fragments of digital memory. But for the people who actually lived through that story, no one was ever the same. 7:12 in the morning. Ethan Cole stood in the small kitchen behind the old laundromat on Rutledge Avenue, brewing his own coffee just like he did every single day. The silver coffee maker hummed with its familiar, steady sound. Early morning sunlight filtered through the worn window frame, casting thin, golden strips across the wooden table. There were no bodyguards, no assistants, no fleet of black SUVs waiting down on the street. The chairman of a corporate empire worth tens of billions of dollars still lived in that simple 2-bedroom apartment. He still ironed his own clothes every Sunday morning. He still had breakfast at the old diner near the harbor, where the waitress called him Honey, having absolutely no idea just how massive his net worth was. And Ethan preferred it that way. Some people build wealth just to prove their worth to the world. Ethan had outgrown that stage a long time ago. He sat down in the worn leather chair by the window, the morning paper in his hands. A small article tucked away in the corner of the business section caught his eye, making him pause for a few seconds. Crown Harbor Fellowship receives over 12,000 applications in just one move. Ethan stared at the headline for a long moment, then quietly folded the paper. After that night at Belmont Crown Harbor, he knew he couldn't just stop at firing Preston Hale or polishing the public image of Dominion Crest Capital. He wanted to fix something far deeper, something that had plagued American financial institutions for far too long. And so Ethan established the Crown Harbor Fellowship, a scholarship and mentorship program looking to break into the worlds of finance, hospitality, management, and corporate investment. Special priority given to students of color. First-generation college students, working-class individuals. Ethan didn't want another Preston Hale to ever exist. He wanted to create more Ethan Coles. The new office of the Crown Harbor Fellowship was in a small building overlooking the Charleston harbor. Nothing too extravagant, no gold leaf logos, no sleek corporate Manhattan decor. Just a warm, bright space where young people could walk in without feeling small. Clara Bennett was now working there as the program coordinator. On her first official day, she stood outside the office door for a long time, hesitating to step inside. Just 1 year ago, she had been terrified of losing her job simply for doing the right thing. Now, she was the one interviewing the very first scholarship applicants. Her mother was responding to chemotherapy much better than the doctors had anticipated. Not completely cured yet, but she had started smiling and laughing much more. Clara often stayed late at the office long after hours. Some nights, she would look at the list of scholarship recipients and quietly break down in tears, not out of sadness, but because for the first time in years, she felt her life was no longer just about medical bills. Right in the middle of the Crown Harbor Fellowship office, a small glass frame hung on the wall. Inside was Ethan's old family pocket watch. Beneath the frame, there was only a simple inscription. A person's true worth is revealed by how they treat someone who can offer them absolutely nothing. Amelia Cole had personally placed that pocket watch inside the frame on the day the office opened. After the night she called off the engagement, she walked away from the entire world Preston had dragged her into. No galas, no billionaire parties, no luxury resorts, no dinners where people smiled at each other while secretly judging one another's worth by their watches and business cards. Amelia started a small community education foundation in Charleston. She focused on building libraries and reading programs for children in the low-income neighborhoods near the harbor. The work wasn't glamorous, but for the first time in a very long time, she felt like she was truly living. Some evenings, Amelia would still drop by the old diner to have dinner with her father. The two of them sat in the exact same booth by the window, ordering blueberry pancakes and black coffee just like they had over a decade ago. Sometimes they would talk for hours. Sometimes they just sat in silence, watching the people pass by. But that silence didn't hurt anymore. It was peaceful. One April afternoon, Ethan returned to his apartment after a board meeting in Manhattan. He placed his keys on the table, then noticed a white envelope slipped under the door. No company stamp, no logo, just his name written by hand. The handwriting was slightly shaky. Ethan sat down and opened the letter. Inside was just a single page. Preston Hale had written the entire thing by hand. No lawyers, no PR teams, no excuses. Just a simple letter of apology. He wrote that he once believed wealth and status were the ultimate measures of a person's worth. He wrote that the night at Belmont Crown Harbor was the first time he saw his true self, and it was terrifying. He admitted that what ashamed him the most was not losing his position or his penthouse, but rather the moment he realized Ethan had held on to his dignity even while being thrown out of the hotel, while he had lost his own amidst a ballroom of crystal and champagne. At the end of the letter, Preston wrote a single brief line, "I do not ask for your forgiveness. I only hope I am no longer the man I was that night." Ethan finished reading. Then he carefully folded the letter back up. He didn't make a call. He didn't reply. He didn't send an email. He simply opened his desk drawer and placed the letter inside, alongside the other precious keepsakes he had held on to for years. A photograph of Amelia when she was 6, an old, faded receipt from a diner, and the very first business card of Dominion Crest Capital, from a time when the firm didn't even have a real office. Outside the window, the lights of Charleston began to flicker on. The distant horn of a ship echoed across the harbor in the late afternoon breeze. Ethan stood up to pour himself another cup of coffee. Slowly, at peace, like a man who had spent his entire life knowing that the most valuable thing he could leave behind was not wealth, but the way he treated others when no one was watching. Some people spend their whole lives building a reputation, only to reveal who they truly are in a single moment. Dignity is not a privilege. It is a fundamental right. If this story made you pause for a moment to think about how we treat others in the real world, please leave a comment below. I read every single one, and I truly believe that while a story might not change the whole world, it can change the way we look at the person standing right in front of us tomorrow. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. If you enjoy these cinematic stories about human dignity, the truth behind power, and the quiet moments that change a life forever, please subscribe so you don't miss our next stories. I'll see you in the next video.